Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up. My name is Scott Morgan, Rock Motor City Madmouth. Pleased to be joined by my co-host, Mark Mancini. And we have a great show lined up tonight from rags to riches in Jacksonville, Florida. Got to kid around with my man Mancini here a little bit because I actually had Jacksonville penciled in, but then the guy got strep throat, couldn't make that show. Okay, but maybe it just as well worked out for him. And he wasn't available next week because, he was sort of on a mental vacation and forgot about the show. But the best thing that Mancini had going was the Jacksonville Jaguars kept winning. So you know what? Better late than never, Marco. And I'm glad to have you on. We're going to talk some Jacksonville Jaguars football tonight. How about that?
Well, I'm excited. And I said it 2 years ago, to be exact, on XM 203, Series 217, that the Jags would get to the Super Bowl before we seen Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs back there. And that was after the Chiefs got beat by the Bucs there. So I'm telling you right now, and I've been on this float for a while, ever since they drafted Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
I'm high on this guy, man. I love this guy moving forward. And our float's starting to take on water with all these people that are jumping on it now, Scott.
Yeah, Mark, the one thing I will say about you, pal, is let's talk about 2022 season, okay? You've been very, very consistent totally from the beginning that you felt the Jaguars could win the division. So I'm going to do something that I rarely ever do to you, okay? No, I won't bow to you, okay? I'll give you your I told you so moment. That's the closest thing I'm going to give you because you were really right on target. Let's face it, it took a transformation going from Urban Meyer, which I'll get to in a little bit here, to Doug Peterson, and you've been talking about the Jaguars all year. It's just they had to get used to one another, the coaching staff. So here's your moment that you can go out there and brag here with our national audience, okay, and say, I told you so. Go ahead.
Well, you're right. You're exactly right. I saw it coming. They've had the 2 number 1 picks the last 2 years, and they've drafted well with them. Right. They brought in a players coach in Doug Peterson, who was kind of kicked to the curb in Philadelphia.
Right.
And he's kind of restored order. Coach of the year in my book. I mean, look what he's done. They won the division. They rolled it when they were pretty much left for dead. And when you look at their season was kind of going south. And they're going back to the scene of the crime in Kansas City when it was going south earlier this past year. But they'll go back and play, in Kansas City this weekend. And I think they can go forward with it. They're playing on house money. They can do what they want. And you know what? They were down 27-0. You were at the game along with our other good friend Kyle Nash Saturday night. And everybody probably left out of the stadium when that game was about ready to, thinking the Chargers going to put up another one. But lo and behold, they started to make a comeback just before the half. And man, oh man, they put the dagger right in the Chargers with that last second field goal to seal the Chargers' fate.
Yeah, good point, Mark. Leading to my next point, what a difference a year makes. Urban Meyer and Darrell Bevell, but I mainly put Urban Meyer 3-14, Doug Peterson 9-8. My goodness, how much more of a contrast can you have between two coaches?
Tell me. Not only that, I think what I like about Peterson, he finds his strengths. He doesn't focus on the weaknesses. And Trevor Lawrence threw 4 interceptions, but he threw 4 touchdowns too. So you got to just stick with what you got you there. And they win the division, the last game of the year, beating Tennessee, who completely fell apart. I'm surprised Vrabel still has his job, but that's a story for another day. But I think the Jags defense is underestimated in more ways than one. And look at Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's a pocket passer. You can see the defenses and guys like him and Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett. These are decade type of quarterbacks. I mean, he learned a valuable lesson in college with, Clemson and Dabo Swinney, and it's carried him to where he is now. Nothing rattles him.
It's amazing how you talk about feeding into somebody's strengths. Okay. And here's what I'm going to tell you about that. When I was covering the Miami Dolphins, Mark, back in the early 80s, I was covering for like 2 or 3 years. And Don Shula always used to tell me when I had a private moment. It took me a little while to get used to Shula. It definitely took him more of a while to get used to a young guy like me. But he always told me, I asked him, what made you such a why your teams are always good. He said, Scott, I always go ahead and feed off my team's strengths, not my weaknesses. And that's a common characteristic nowadays that a great coach possesses, Mark. It really does. You feed off what they can do, not what they can't do. And that's why you build a roster about strengths and weaknesses. And Don Shula, to me, spoke it as well as anybody. We don't have to tell you what his record is at the moment, the all-time winningest coach. And so the one coach that has a undefeated, untied season itself. So I want to welcome Beth Truesdale Greenberg. She's a Dolphins fan. So Beth, welcome to the show. I've known Beth a long, long time. She keeps track of what we do. So Beth, thank you for joining us tonight. So with that said, okay, you brought up, and we're going to talk more and more about Peterson too, as well as the show goes on. So I do want to point out, that the largest comebacks in NFL history, postseason wise, are the 1992 Bills 32. We all know about that one. In 2013 Colts 28 points down. 2022 Jaguars, again, we saw just hours ago. And in 2016 when the Patriots came down 25. I believe that was a Super Bowl, if I recall correctly. But anyways, right. The Jacksonville Jaguars put themselves in a position where you can go ahead and put yourself in a category like that. That's just truly remarkable, isn't it? I mean, think about it.
I'll tell you one thing.
Nothing, Mark. Seriously.
When you look at their history, you had Mark Brunell there, but Blake Bortles and Leonard Fournette ran the Steelers into the ground in 2018 when they were, they duplicated what they did in 2008, beating the Steelers the first time, twice in the same season, beating them there in the regular season and the playoffs. But I think this team is a little bit better run and a little bit more special moving forward. I think they can go to Kansas City, and we'll see where they go after that, whether it's Buffalo or Cincinnati.
Well, amazingly enough, Mark, when you talk about what the Jaguars have accomplished, okay, I was at the last playoff game that they won in Jacksonville prior to this last one when they beat the Buffalo Bills 10-3. And I can tell you, TIAA Bank Stadium has been great for me. When you think about the fact that I've been to 3, and I'm going to get into that momentarily, I just want to put it out there for everybody as well. I've seen a lot of great games over in that very stadium, and I owe a lot of this to my longtime friend Dan Edwards for getting me going, and now David Wolf has been very helpful with me. But before I go any further, Mark, I want to let everybody know that Fire Up can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. So please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube. South Florida Tribune, okay? We're striving to get 1,000 subscribers, so every click matters. Please subscribe, hit the red button, and we are good to go. So back to my thoughts, okay? You mentioned this a little bit earlier, and now we'll talk about it now. The Jaguars are the master of the big comebacks. Down 17-0 against the Raiders. How'd that turn out? 27-20 win. Dallas Cowboys down 27-10. Yours truly was there. Okay, how did that turn out? 40-34 in overtime. A walk-off interception by Rayshon Jenkins. LA Chargers down 27-0, 131-30. So, and the games that I attended, Mark, okay, because I got tied up with my Miami Hurricanes responsibilities, and I wasn't able to get up earlier in the year until December and January, of course. But the games I attended were Dallas, which was an unbelievable classic. I was actually emailing David Wolf and said, this is one of the greatest games I've ever seen. So when he gives me the credential approval, well, maybe the one on Tennessee will be better than the last one. And that was his way of saying, it was a candid way of saying, okay, you're approved, you're good. How did it work out? Okay, they defeated the Tennessee Titans 20-16, okay, to win the division. Of course, we just talked about the Chargers. And the last two games drew over 70,000 fans. So let me tell you, this is a football town that's waiting to erupt. I said that a few years ago when they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game, only to lose to New England in the waning minutes of the game. But this is a town that, let me tell you, Duval, obviously, or Duval, whatever they call it up there, they're waiting for something big to happen. And I know, and you mentioned it earlier, Mark, okay, that Doug Peterson is the guy to do it. And I dealt with a lot of coaches, and I dealt with him a little bit. One of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And it's all about the team. And I think a lot, and one of the things that they had recently done is that after the game, they ended up going to Waffle House and celebrating their victory there. So, a a lot of calories, but not that they care because they don't worry about calorie counts when you're burning them off at a record pace. So let's talk about the cardiac Jags, Mark. What are your thoughts about the big comebacks that they've had?
Well, I thought it was going to cost, the Chargers coach his job. All they did was fire the offensive coordinator. I don't know how you throw him under the bus instead of the coach. The coach has made inept decisions, especially the last two games when they knew they were going to Jacksonville last week of the season, and they still played Mike Williams, who injured his back. He couldn't play in the Charger game, but how stupid was that? And then they had the Jags down 27-0, and they fail to keep their foot on the gas. You were there. You saw it. Took this sail out of the, pretty much South Florida's, airstream, but they just didn't give up. They started kicking away, and just before halftime, and, the Chargers failed to, do some other things in the third and fourth quarter. It was total domination, and the Jags found their way, and, successive drives got back in the game and put the dagger in them. But I think the Chargers really got to look at themselves in more ways than one. There should have been a lot of guys going out with that offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's amazing how you say that, Mark. As soon as I left the game, I was telling my wife, Brandon Staley's gone. But then again, usually the way it happens in the National Football League, you're in there 2 years. The third year, if you aren't successful, okay, you can get rid of the coordinators. But by year number 3, that seat is really, really boiling. It really is. And now I don't think that the Chargers would have ever had a chance at Sean Payton, because I don't think the ownership of the Chargers, the Spanos family, could afford him anyways. I really don't. But that was my first thought as I was leaving the stadium back to our hotel out in St. Augustine, that he would be gone. But things have cooled down a little bit. It looks like Staley will get at least one more year, but he's going to have to make some major staff changes in order to keep his job. And I was surprised. Joe Lombardi, I know, used to be the offensive coordinator for the Lions and a few other places, got run out of there. And if you can't maximize the talent level that you have with a guy like Justin Herbert, something's badly wrong.
Well, and not only that, I mean, he's a silent killer. The guy with the hair, man, is deadly. But he can't carry everything on his back. And I look at it like this. I know a lot of people think the 1 year, is not enough time, but I'm into firing these guys. If you go on 6, 7, 8 game losing streaks when you're firmly entrenched in the division like Vrabel was, and I think the only thing that saved that other guy in Miami was the Jets didn't, put the dagger in them. Otherwise, the Steelers would have been in the playoffs. He should have been gone too, but he escaped that pass rush and saved his job. And then he had a good game against Buffalo this past weekend. But I'm a firm believer Staley is made bad choices all year, and he's kind of dodged the pass rush, but he should be let go. They should, if Sean Payton's available or Jim Harbaugh, give them what they want. They'll run your organization. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's amazing how you say that too, Mark. I think one of the reasons that Mike McDaniel was spared is, number one, the myriad of injuries that he had over at the quarterback position didn't help his case. Tua was banged up, and then you had to go to the third string quarterback. Skylar Thompson, Teddy Bridgewater hasn't been the same for quite a few years, just nothing more than a backup. But no, I'm going to get back to what you said with Staley. This guy was a train wreck going for everything on fourth down a year ago. You thought he learned a little bit more. He gets them to the playoffs at least. If they don't make the playoffs, then yeah, by all means, what you're saying is 100,000% value. But you get him to the playoffs. But I agree if you get Sean Payton. But what do you think the average rate's going to be for Sean Payton? Between 10 and 20 million a year?
It's going to be big money, but he's bringing his defensive coordinator with him, and Vic Fangio, who's good.
No, I know.
And that's more than the price of admission. So you're going to have to give him complete control of the organization. And if you're a good owner, sit back. Bidwell in Arizona might just sit back and worry about bringing his millions in, and let Sean Payton run the organization. I mean, that's what I would do. He's going to bring his defensive coordinator, let him have his own GM in there, and let them run roughshod for 5 years. He'll turn your organization around.
Well, I mean, come on. Sean Payton's smarter than anybody. He took a year off, for crying out loud, just to size up what was there. Got in TV booth, just took a little break like anybody else. And what do you think is going to happen? He's going to go where he pick his choice. I want to go back to a point you mentioned earlier, though, and I'm going to bring it up again, okay? Jags are the first team to reach the playoffs after drafting number one in back-to-back seasons. 2021, we talked about Trevor Lawrence. 2022, Trayvon Walker. So therefore, you talk about an instant turnaround. But again, the best acquisition they had was Doug Peterson, for crying out loud. I mean, but think about it. 2 number one picks, you get them right, and here they are in the playoffs.
Well, not only that, I think Doug Peterson, you said it from the beginning there, seeing it from afar. He basically said when he got hired, he wanted to win it for the owner, Khan. He really felt Khan was a real good owner. Really wanted to win. Has put his foot there in Jacksonville, and I like what Doug Peterson. This guy not only has accountability around him, he's got communication and he's got humility, and he basically laid it out for these guys that, hey, we got to win it for the owner, and he's given me the opportunity to turn this thing around after the Urban Meyer fiasco, and I think that's more important in more ways than one.
Mark, you want to talk about a very interesting dynamic here, okay? Think about it. Here we are a year ago, okay? Byron Leftwich is interviewing for the job, but he doesn't want to work with Trent Baalke, okay? Does not want to work with Trent Baalke. And now, a year later, what do you think is going to happen? Byron Leftwich is going to be fired at Tampa. And there's even rumors that he might be going to Pittsburgh. So You want to talk about a guy who should never have gotten too wrapped up in himself thinking, hey, your former organization wanted you. Hear me out, okay, Mark? Your former organization wanted you to be the head coach, and you were trying to dictate it, you being a guy with no head coaching experience at all, to get an opportunity in a town waiting when you're up. And now he's going to be on the streets. What are your thoughts about Byron Leftwich?
Well, I've had a chance to interview him years ago. I like him. I mean, and I think he's going to be the offensive coordinator of the Steelers. That's where the rumors are circulating, and it's circulating pretty good. They'll get rid of Canada out of there in Pittsburgh and bring in Leftwich. They've kind of wanted him for a while. But, with the offensive woes in Tampa, that goes beyond what he's done. Their running attack has just been atrocious there. Brady throws 356 yards, and the rest of the team does absolutely nothing. They couldn't catch the ball so they were kind of out of sync with Evans and everything. But this is a team that had problems running the ball. And I don't see necessarily it falls on Leftwich, but, Leftwich is going to end up in Pittsburgh. I was kind of shocked he didn't go back to Jacksonville too, but Doug Peterson grabs it, and you see what's happening there. And I think it's going to be a marriage. It's going to last for quite a while in Jacksonville with these guys.
Well, I don't think there's any question. Will Vogel says Peterson is a great coach, is a Super Bowl winner. Yeah, we know that, but it's always good to remind ourselves what a great coach this guy is. And I can tell you, I'll go even a step further with him, okay? Doug Peterson has any kind of success, he gets him to the Super Bowl and wins one. Okay, here's the thing. This guy's getting a statue outside of TIAA Bank Field. He really is. So, and I'll backtrack off of Will Vogel said, and you can even respond to this to Will if you'd like, Mark. Leftwich may be, and he will teach Pickett a few things. So why don't you respond to that comment about Leftwich real quick, and we'll stay on topic with the Jaguars, but I think Will makes a very valid point here. So give him your feedback on this.
Well, that's a great question, and I think he will help Pickett moving forward. And Pickett took a lot of growing pains, and I think that's more or less, you got to get thrown in the fire and see how you succeed. But my 3 quarterbacks moving forward in this league has always been Lawrence, Jones, and Pickett. And I just think these guys are pocket passers. They've learned in great organizations.
Right.
Jones in Alabama, Pickett at the University of Pittsburgh, and where Lawrence came out of Clemson. So I think they learned a lot to get them ready for the NFL. And, an offensive coordinator will take it a step further with them and absorb it like a sponge. But, yeah, I like that question.
Yeah, I think it was a really good one, Will. Thanks for inserting that. So getting back on point with the Jaguars, okay, we talk about the fact that a year ago, Travis Etienne, the running back now, was Lawrence's teammate over at Clemson University. Obviously, he was out the entire year due to an injury. They brought him back. You saw what a big factor he was. And you talk about the receiving core for the Jaguars. My God. I mean, you got Marvin Jones in from Detroit. Jamal Agnew is a great special teams guy. Zay Jones, and the list goes on and on. And when I see the fact that Trevor Lawrence is a fairly athletic quarterback, runs only when he has to, he's not afraid to use his legs, but he's smart about it. So I think when you look at the Jacksonville offense. It's a lot better than most people think. Now, bear in mind, though, when the Jaguars hammered the Chargers 38-10 earlier in the year, the Chargers made adjustments and made it very close the second time around. Now we have a unique dynamic, okay? The Jaguars started the year off slow. I believe they were like 1-6, if I remember right, but they were way behind the A-ball. And then once they lost to the Detroit Lions in December, they woke up and never lost again. And what amazes me enough about it is they have been playing playoff football for the last 5-6 weeks. And again, I'm just glad I've been able to see a lot of it toward the latter part of the year. But, now you have a dynamic here, Mark, okay, that Kansas City beat them for 4. What kind of adjustments will Jacksonville make? But the two words that you mentioned, which were so much a bullseye, is that they are on house money.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, they're the hottest team in the NFL. Besides the San Francisco 49ers have won like 11 in a row. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to go to Kansas City. They're going to enjoy the barbecue food. And I don't care what the spread is or the line is or the over, or the under, whatever. I'll take my chances any day of the week with Trevor Lawrence over Patrick Mahomes. And, Mahomes has got to, do something. I know Kansas City's tough at home, but who's to say the Jags can't go in there and do some damage? They did damage in, L.A. beating the Chargers earlier in the year. They beat them twice, and they almost beat Philly to snap that undefeated streak earlier in the year until they took their foot off the pedal. But I don't see why they can't go into Kansas City in a crucial playoff game and beat the Chiefs and then roll it to see where they go after that, whether it's Cincinnati or Buffalo.
Well, if Will Vogel knows anything about hockey, we'll give him the hat trick for this comment, okay? I think Peterson's mindset and Lawrence play will bring free agents to Jacksonville. Good point. And no, we don't need to be reminded about the 4 picks. Well, but you're on a roll. It's okay to get those in. But let's talk about the mindset and the fact that Will is totally accurate that free agents could indeed be coming to Jacksonville with these two leading the recruiting charge.
Well, winning solves everything. That creates a good culture and a mindset. So, this is they haven't snuck up on the league. They've been building stuff for quite a while. They got a good owner that likes to spend money. He's like a Jerry Jones. He'll do whatever it takes. I know Jacksonville might not be as big as Dallas, but still, free agents don't mind going to Florida. It's a great place. There's no state tax. Why wouldn't you want to go there?
No. Well, it's true. I mean, Shad Khan's been a pretty low-key owner, and his motto is to find football people to run it. Thankfully for Shad this year, however, okay, he hasn't had to get involved, and he's let Peterson and Balky handle the whole thing. And it's okay for him to hang out in his private suite and watch the people that he pays a decent amount of money do their job, and they're doing it real well. So we appreciate Will Vogel's comments in the chat room. But I think Will does make a great point. Lawrence and Peterson will attract free agents. And, again, they're 9-8. We're not going to sit here and anoint them Super Bowl champions. But, boy, when you see in the NFL as a constant worst to first turnaround, there are a lot of those stories out there. And I could sit here and tell you if we had more time how many of those we get every year. But I know at least 3 to 4 or 5 new teams make the playoffs, and a lot of them drop off. And this is just an example in a town so hungry for a winner. And when you talk about Dallas and Jacksonville, the Dallas Cowboys overall have never beaten the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. I think they won a home game against Jacksonville in London, but I don't count that. I'm talking about in Jacksonville, Florida. So I think that even though we're not talking about the Bucs, the Cowboys had their way against the Buccaneers last night, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are a tough organization. And I truly believe in my mind they're the best kept secret in the state of Florida. They don't get a lot of publicity, but as it stands right now, they're 8 wins and 7 losses in the playoffs. And to me, that's unbelievable. And again, the Urban Meyer, I'll say this before we end the broadcast, Mark, and that Doug Peterson told Trevor Lawrence when he came on, forget about everything you learned last year. We're doing it all over again. And that's what he did. And now you have a coach embracing his quarterback on the field all the time. Yes, it was definitely a bad start throwing that many interceptions early. But again, people have to understand that football is a 60-minute game, okay? And the Jacksonville Jaguars have shown that throughout this incredible run. And for a lot of you folks out there that understand, okay, it's as Yogi Berra would say, it's not over till it's over. So glad we had a chance to talk about. So, all right, Mark, give me a prediction really quickly about Kansas City and Jacksonville.
I think Jacksonville wins it like 30-27. I like it. I mean, and then the float will get even more. It'll take on more water from people jumping on from, Daytona Beach or St. Augustine or Orlando or Tampa. But I like the Jags in this one. And then if they go to Buffalo or Cincinnati, win that, and they go to the Super Bowl, they've never been to a Super Bowl.
Right.
Wouldn't this be amazing how many people will tell you or how many people will buy Jags gear?
Well, they're already doing it now, but if we forecast in the manner that you're doing it, can only imagine. So I'm glad you put hey, listen, I have to give you the prediction. I'm not making one because I have to be objective because I have to be unbiased because I'm covering the team and I try to be objective. But that doesn't stop you from, having the last word and being able to do the fact that you're not a bandwagon guy. That's what I like about you. You stay true to who you are the entire time. So that's why you get the lone prediction of the show.
By the way, folks, the kind words.
Well, my pleasure. Hey, they're earned, man. I'm giving you anything you can earn, but you're welcome. So just so you know, folks, from rags to riches in Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Jaguar story. My name is Scott Morganroth, along with Mark Mancini. I'm the Motor City Madmouth. I'm going to tell you right now, it's been fun going to Jacksonville for this evening and talking about this incredible underdog story, which indeed we are doing. So just so you know that Fire Up can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it one last time, please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. And we're striving to get 1,000 subscribers. Before I give you the opportunity to identify where you're at, you can follow me on Twitter at Tribune South. So you go to South Florida Tribune at Tribune South. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. Feel free to email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And we'll be more than happy to also incorporate your suggestions at some point or another. We would love to have them. And if your suggestions are good and they merit bringing you on the show, I have no problem in sending that invite button as well. So Mark Mancini and I work together on Saturday, Sports Talk Saturday, along with Bruce Kessinger. Enjoy doing that show as well with Mark. And, of course, Mark and I are working on some other projects that will be announced at a later date. Mark, with that said, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me right here on Tuesday, 7 o'clock straight up Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, XM 203, Sirius 217 on Fridays. Thursdays, I'm in Philly on WWDB AM 860 with Marianne and Sal and myself. And, I'm so blessed. And third year doing it with the Pittsburgh Pirates first base coach, Derek Brock, starting in February.
Good for you. And also later on tonight, the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, Inside the Pigskin. We're looking at about an 8:30 approximate broadcast time. I'll be joined on that show with Candy Ebling, Rick Curdy, Travis Holmes, who I met up in Jacksonville, who gave his first opportunity on the show, Mel Farr and Jordan Long. So I have a really, really, really dynamic crew, but there's nothing better than to lead it off with Fire Up. Mark Mancini and I, we do this every Tuesday night, and we're hoping to expand our broadcast time to accommodate guests in the coming weeks. So, but meanwhile, great show tonight, Mark. Really glad to have you on again. Holidays, we all take a break, but I think we're all fire up, okay, to have a banner 2023. So once again, on behalf of Mark Madman Mancini, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on Fire Up, Rags to Riches in Jacksonville. Good night, everybody. Follow us, and we look forward to next week. Good night now.